Hello and welcome to the PhD Life Raft podcast. I'm Emma Brzezinski and today I am talking to the wonderful Devon Price about their book Laziness Does Not Exist. This is a fantastic book that I think speaks directly to PhD students. It has chapter titles such as "You don't have to be an expert in everything" and "Your achievements are not your worth." And in this conversation, we talk about the pernicious workaholic culture within academia. And we also talk about how checking in with your own core values can act as an antidote. So I do hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi, good evening.
Well, actually, it's evening for me. It's not evening for you.
No, but you know what? It's the middle of the afternoon, so I'm already kind of thinking about my evening plans. I'm mentally done for the day, for sure.
I love that. And that so sets us off for what we're going to talk about today. So thank you so much for being here. I have just read your fantastic book and I cannot wait for you to tell everybody more about it. But before we do that, we always start with asking people about their own journey into and through the PhD. So can you tell us a little bit about how that was for you?
Sure, yeah. So I knew relatively young that I wanted to be an academic, or I thought I wanted to be an academic.
Amazing.
I was really into psychology as a 15, 16-year-old. I was on the debate team, and just in my research for whatever the debate topic of the month every month was, I was just always coming up against social science research and experiments. And I just thought, I really want to be one of those people in a lab doing experiments on people and figuring out why they behave the way they behave.
Amazing.
So I picked up a book from the American Psychological Association called Getting In, The Complete Guide to Graduate School Success. I was reading that when I was like 18.
Amazing.
And I went to this panel when I was looking at potential colleges and universities to go to about getting into graduate school in psychology. And a professor there, gave some advice that was life-changing advice for me. As someone who came from kind of a lower middle class to working class background, they said, if you pay to go to graduate school, you're doing it wrong. That if you play your cards right, you should be getting paid to go to graduate school. And I was like, hold on a second. Whoa, okay, this is going to actually be possible for me. Because up until that point, I thought it was maybe not actually attainable. So I started planning from that period on really concretely. Okay, I need to volunteer in this many labs during undergrad. I need to take these classes. I need to make sure I'm kind of like grooming potential letter of recommendation writers out of my favorite professors by taking their classes a bunch of times and really kind of talking a lot in class. I was very strategic and single-minded about it.
Wow.
Yeah. And so then I finished, I graduated from the Ohio State University at 20 years old and applied to graduate school. I applied to I think 20 programs, and I got into 4 or 5.
Wow.
And then I came here to Loyola University, Chicago, which is where I still teach now as an assistant professor. And I pretty quickly realized it wasn't exactly what I thought it would really be. I loved reading about research and reading about theories for why people behaved the way they behaved. But when I got to look under the hood and see how some of these tenured professors did research, I saw a lot of what we now today call questionable research practices. This isn't to say anybody was doing anything that was against the norms of the time.
No.
What people were doing was completely normal and was preached at conferences. But it was things like p-hacking. So basically doing little tips and tricks to try and round your results into significance, and testing lots of different variables and only reporting the ones that had significant effects. Things like that we now recognize as really kind of gaming the system. But again, it was completely normal at the time. And I want to be careful about how I talk about that, because I'm not accusing anyone of anything. But it was still really dispiriting for me.
Yes. Yes.
So I go through graduate school. I really push my way through as quickly as possible, learning to kind of play a very strategic game of study the things that you know have a good chance of success, rather than necessarily something that's too lofty and ambitious and big picture about social issues that, might not actually pay off. And then I finished my PhD when I was 25 years old. And I immediately, like right after defending, came down with a terrible fever that didn't go away for like 9 months afterward. I had just been going since I was about, 17, 18 years old through to 25 with this goal in mind. And then I found out it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. And then it made me really physically sick, and I had a heart murmur, and I kind of talk about all that stuff in the book.
Yes.
But yeah, it was a big wake up call. I kind of had I had a very literal quarter life crisis, I guess.
Yes. And so it kind of, this takes us right into, as you say, that where your kind of your interest and where the book starts in terms of what, from some points of view, would be seen as a success story, in terms of like, wow, look at you, you've got through that, you did all of that, amazing. But actually you ended up really very ill, and then was questioning what was going on and how these things were working out, and ended up then writing this book, Laziness Does Not Exist. Oh, how I love that title. So can you then just talk us through the big thing that you talk about is the laziness lie. Can you tell us about what you're exploring there?
Yeah, so the laziness lie is a set of beliefs that's really deeply embedded in our culture about the value of work and the kind of evil and mistrust we have to approach laziness with. It's a really kind of gloomy view of human nature, basically. And I think it's directly responsible for why I was such a workaholic going into academia, and why academia operates the way that it does, as well as most workplaces. And the laziness lie, the way I talk about it, it has 3 main tenets. They're kind of unspoken beliefs that we absorb through our culture. And the first tenet is that your worth is defined by your productivity. Basically, that you have to kind of earn your right to be alive through achievement and making money and wrapping up accolades and things like that. The second tenet is that you can't trust your needs and limits. Any feeling that you have, any weakness, illness, those are just things you're supposed to push away and ignore and white knuckle your way through, because they're a threat to your productivity. And then the final tenet of the laziness lie is that there's always more that you could be doing. So even if you are someone like me who was playing by the rules of that game and was kind of succeeding, at least on paper, I wasn't doing enough volunteer work. I wasn't exercising enough. I wasn't, I didn't have a full enough and impressive enough social life. There's an impossible litany of expectations that none of us can actually meet, because the game is set up for us to lose from this outside of it.
Yes. And I am sure those 3 tenets are going to absolutely resonate with people who are listening to this, because they are of a very strong flavour in academia. With your productivity, you don't trust your feelings, and there's always more you could be doing. How many PhD students have I spoken to who's like, well, I'm just not doing enough, I'm not reading enough, I haven't done enough, and all that causes. And so you talk about the way in which this is fabricated. Can you tell us a little bit about that, in terms of how we can understand the creation of this?
Yeah, sure. So I trace it back to the Puritans, who had this really, it was really viewed as a very abnormal belief system at the time, which is part of why they left England for, colonizing United States. They really believed that if you were super productive and driven, that was a sign that you had already been chosen for heaven. And that if someone lacked focus, or they were, what we would now recognize as depressed or ADHD or just struggling from who knows what else, that was a sign that they were already damned, basically. And this even extended their views on children. Like, they expected children to be completely morally upstanding, productive little adults. And they would create high chairs and furniture that would try to force babies into an adult human posture, even, because they thought being weak was just evil. Basically, needing help was evil. And so when they came over to the being colonized United States, that worldview was very useful to adopt as a broader part of American culture, because it justified enslaving people. If people are fundamentally evil and unmotivated, and you have to force them to work in order to save their souls, suddenly you have a justification for taking people's freedom away and taking their children away. And it also really was a useful way to kind of exploit indentured servants and poor white laborers too. And following abolition, it was a great tool for pitting those two groups against one another and telling, for example, working class white people in the US, oh, we shouldn't pay reparations to freed Black Americans because they're just lazy and looking for a handout, and those kinds of things. And unfortunately, those same beliefs have been with us. And certainly we've really transmitted them as Americans to, the whole planet, basically. The shape that it takes always morphs a little bit as our culture and our economy starts to look a little bit different, but we're basically still just basting in this belief that most people don't want to work and don't want to do productive things, and you can't trust people, and you can't trust yourself. You can't listen to your own body and your own emotions. We just need to constantly be driving to do more and more and more. And it's really tainted the academy as well as most workplaces.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because of this sense of, as you say, I think especially that not listening to yourself, that actually your body is worthless, that actually it's your brain in the academy, and you just keep going, you keep pushing on through, and don't listen to yourself. And of course we know that ends up in all sorts of difficulties for people. I was really interested too, you were just talking there about the way in which it was a useful tool to oppress people with. And I was really interested, you talk about in the book, the way in which people perhaps who don't have privilege, therefore feel the need to work even harder, that they kind of, and so they buy into the system even harder.
Yeah, because you're in such a precarious spot. I mean, we all are under our current economic system. If you can't work, your ability to be alive and have any degree of comfort or even just life is under threat. But it's doubly true if you are a person of color, if you're a trans person, if you have mental illness, anything that puts you even more on the margins. If you grew up in poverty. For the book, I interviewed a lot of kind of workaholics and people who were severely burnt out. And almost all of them came from either a working class background where they really knew what it was like to be on the edge of starving or being homeless, or they were a racial minority, or were queer, or were in some other way, often multiple ways, living on the edge. And that puts you in a situation where you never trust your success. We talk a lot in the academy about imposter syndrome, but it's not really an individual neurosis the way we talk about it. It's recognizing that you are in a system that doesn't recognize you and doesn't respect you, and that might throw you out on the curb at any moment. So unfortunately, that kind of paranoia and workaholism that we talk about as kind of an individual compulsion, it makes sense from where people are sitting, which is really the saddest part about it. And Black American families, at least for decades, have been talking about how they raise their kids that you have to work twice as hard, at least, to get half as far as a white colleague. And that's unfortunately the lived reality for a lot of people that are in that kind of position or in similar positions. And so it's really, really hard to escape, because how do you unlearn a paranoia that isn't actually paranoia? It's recognizing the situation you're in.
Exactly. And it serves that system, doesn't it? Nobody's going to say to you, no, don't try so hard.
Right. Yes. Yeah. People have so much to gain off of you not recognizing, what your potential really is and the respect that you actually deserve. And we're such a pyramid scheme in academia, where we really thrive on having insecure graduate students who are just fighting to claw their way to a secure position that will, for many of them, never actually arrive.
Yes. Absolutely. And I think recognizing what I think is so brilliant about your book is the systemic nature of it, as you say, because again, that's another way in which people are bound in, because they think, oh, it's just me, this is just what I'm feeling. And to recognize that this is systemic, maybe then that can start to give a little bit of space, open up a little bit of thinking space for people to realize that this is a bigger thing that's going on here. So I feel like I want to draw out also the things that you're offering and proposing, because it isn't just about recognizing and speaking out about this, that you're also talking about what's important and what we should kind of embrace. You talk about wasting time as a human need, and the importance of rest, and being you say laziness helps us to be creative. So can you talk to us a little bit about your learnings of kind of other ways of being, and ways in which how to work less? Can you help us with that?
Sure. Yeah. So the first place to really start, I think, is that we set out to meet expectations that are not reality based. And this is something that our bosses or our mentors set out for us, and also expectations that we set out for ourselves. We're not robots. We're not carpenter ants. We can't keep going constantly. That's just not in the nature of how the human body or the human brain works. We're like, I saw a tweet about this recently that framed it in kind of a new way for me, that like, you're a very large carnivorous mammal. Cats don't run around constantly working. They sleep most of the day, because that's just part of the biology of a large kind of apex predator. And that's true for humans too. We have to really conserve our energy. And we know from decades of industrial organizational psychology research that there's no workplace in the world where people just sit down and work producing something tangible for 8 hours per day. Even if you force people to stay in an office that long, they're going to work about 3 to 4 hours per day on average. And the rest of that time, they're going to spend daydreaming and pretending to work and socializing and organizing their pens and all of these other things, because that's really what our brains need. We're kind of meant, quote unquote, to be like scanning our environment and engaging with others and digesting the information that we take in. And that's just particularly true for any really intellectually heavy or creative work. You need what in psychology we call the incubation period, where you're not focusing on trying to force the insight or force the creativity. It's just working in the background of your mind. And that's why we have our best ideas in the shower or on vacation, because our brains are still doing work even when we're not forcing ourselves to produce something. And unfortunately, most of us still put a schedule and a set of expectations around ourselves that assumes we could work 8 hours straight if only we had the willpower. And that's just never going to happen.
And that's the thing. And then beat ourselves up when that doesn't happen. And so it goes on. But I think this sense of recognizing the importance of rest, of incubation, of downtime, as productive, if that's probably not the right term, is it? Because I don't want to buy in again to these ideas of productivity, but as generative. Can we say generative?
Yes,
I don't know.
Yeah, I like generative.
Generative time. I love that. I love that. And yeah, in order to be creative and full human beings. Thank you so much for that. There's so much more I could ask you about, and I really would recommend this book. It talks about procrastination and elements like that, which again I know is a big thing for PhD students, and so I really would recommend it. I'm aware of time, and I want to have time to ask you the unfair question that I ask everybody, which is around: do you have a kind of a top tip? Which, you know, this is deep and beautifully crafted work, so I feel embarrassed asking it. But what could people take away from this and put into action, I guess, really?
Yeah. I think this piece of advice it distills a lot of the principles of the book as a whole. So it doesn't feel too like, a quick and dirty tip that kind of misses the meat of it. Right. And what it comes down to is thinking about what you value most in life. What do you believe in? What's important to you? What experiences in life make you feel the most alive, or as if time is slowing down? Like when you think back on your life moments that really stay with you, the moments that make you say, like, if all of life were like this, it would be amazing. Using those kinds of questions to really identify what's important to you, and then look at where the disjoint is between that and how you actually spend your day-to-day life. And what can you do to get those two things to be more in alignment with each other? Because of course we all have, doing the laundry and running errands and answering email, and those are not peak life experiences for most of us. But there are probably moments, playing with your kids, moments of play and exploration, walks around your neighborhood where you see something beautiful or unexpected, that tell you a little bit more about what potential your life really has to be in alignment with your values and what you really believe in. So take a look at what matters the most to you in your life. Look at how obligations and routines in your life are kind of detracting from that. And then just ask yourself, what can I stop doing? What obligations am I trying to meet just because society says I should be doing them, that I don't actually care about and that I don't actually value? Because the more we learn to say no and disappoint people and let certain obligations drop, the more we can kind of move joyfully towards those moments that actually do really make time slow down and make everything look vivid and lush and meaningful.
I love that so much. And I think, again, in terms of thinking about the PhD, that could be that kind of gift, right? This is an opportunity to live out those values, to immerse yourself in something that you love. So I think those words are truly golden. Devon, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your awesome book and for speaking out about all of these things and bringing them to awareness in a really useful and critically useful way. Thank you so much, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much for having me.